Hello there. I must admit, when I was first asked to do a webinar regarding where to begin on inclusion in youth programming, I wasn't sure where to begin on a webinar. It seemed so obvious to me, probably because I'd always been included in youth programming. When your primary Jewish outlet is the URJ Youth Division in your synagogue, and your father is both a congregational rabbi and a rabbi who works with the camps in NIFTY, it's just assumed and expected that programming will be available to you, and you really don't know anything else. Then I realized that this simple yet profound notion is the key to inclusion in a youth programming environment. The key is to create an expectation that all youth simply will be included. Think about it for a moment. In workplaces, there's work that must be done, and so inclusion always needs to be balanced against the question of the value of inclusion to the work. If an accommodation is too expensive or makes someone insufficiently productive, then the law provides a pass. This, incidentally, is the heart of what in employment is called the undue burden analysis. Similarly, in a place of commerce, at a certain point there's no commercially viable product for a particular disability. Though these days, with accessible triathlons, soon-to-be self-driving cars that blind people can use, and various other products, hopefully this particular endpoint will vanish. But what about Jewish youth programming? Our Jewish youth programming exists only to educate and validate our youth, developing them as people and fostering their connection to Judaism, Jewish life, Israel, and society. I would argue that, while there may be a few people for whom we have yet to figure out an appropriate way with which to connect, and there may occasionally be shortages of resources, there is never a point when the necessary resources outstrip the value of participation in the Jewish people. Further, Jews with disabilities are as varied in interest, style, and presentation as any other Jew created in the image of God. As such, just like I connected through camp while my younger brother never felt compatible with camp but connected through NIFTY and a young adult program in Israel, each Jew with a disability will find that connection to our community in a different way. And I feel it to be incumbent upon us, if we wish to one day reap the benefit of their connection, to be completely open to this method. To me, this has two major components, which I will call preparation and reaction. Perhaps unsurprisingly, preparation includes those things that we do in advance. Preparation includes making sure that every event, whether held at your synagogue or community center, a person's home or a private venue, is physically accessible. It means that you've done a good faith accounting of whether you'd be able to provide interpretation services and what you would do if an individual with a hearing impairment requested to participate. It means that every synagogue policy already in place to promote inclusion is equally binding on a youth event. It means that your advertising makes it clear that people with disabilities are welcome and will be accommodated to the fullest extent possible. And lastly, preparation means that you make the internal commitment that you will find a way to accept all comers. Reaction, the other component, is what you do once a person presents. A couple of general thoughts. First, the end goal is always that you will find a way to include the individual, not that you're trying to evaluate whether or not inclusion is feasible. Second, you recognize that the only two things about your event which are sacrosanct are that the event is safe and that it provides a fun and meaningful connection for all participants to whatever Jewish communal value, from learning to social justice to socialization, is the goal of that particular program. Everything else is on the table to make inclusion happen. An example that people wouldn't often think about is changing the location of an event from an inaccessible home to the accessible synagogue, provided that the event can be run in a synagogue. This is just an example of nothing off the table and the idea that we can change any part of a program if it will help for inclusion. The third thing to keep in mind is that the capacity for meaningful solutions, especially where children are involved, is near limitless. Fourth, and counterintuitively, you need to remember that the inability to figure out an inclusion strategy for a particular event should neither be acceptable and ignored, nor considered a demoralizing failure, but rather simply needs to be met with the conviction to do it better next time. So with that in mind, what do you actually do? First, make sure that the individual and the parents understand your current plan for the event. Then, listen hard while they tell you what challenges that event might present. Don't presume that you know their challenges. As an example, people often presume that I will have trouble if an event requires going over the grass. I gotta say, as a veteran summer camper of URJ camps, I handle grass just fine. So listen to the concerns that are expressed and let those be the focus of your inclusion and efforts. Next, you're going to ask one question and then you're going to listen some more. You're going to say, please tell me the strategies that you have used in the past and strategies that you think that might work in this instance, and then please tell me how I can help you to implement these strategies and overcome these obstacles. If they offer solutions and it's something you can do, job done. They've got the solution. All you need to do is implement. If the solution they offer is one that you can't implement, start thinking outside the box. First, ask them if they have any alternatives. Is there anything that you've done before when a venue has a 6-inch step, when we can't afford a sign language interpreter, or when we don't have access to a wheelchair accessible vehicle? Some people with disabilities have a wealth of experience and understand that their first choice isn't always available to meet a challenge. If the answer is no, if they haven't yet figured out a solution, try to gauge if the person is open to learning or creating a new solution. If there's an initial resistance, express your extreme interest in working with them to ensure their participation. At any rate, once and if they agree, it's time to put on your thinking cap, the young person's thinking cap, and the parent's thinking cap, and engage any other creative people in your synagogue or group, all with the goal of finding a solution. Remember, equally on the table should be creative technical solutions like communication through transcription on an iPad if you can't find an interpreter, and changing the event. For instance, is it critical that the trust-building exercise in your event be a trust fall if a person can't do it because of a physical disability? Or could you find another trust exercise within the capabilities of the individual? I wish I could say that we ended here, and I do believe that with this mindset and this approach, 99% of people with disabilities will be able to participate in 99% of your youth program. This is especially the case because with the collaborative, helpful ingenuity of a group of kids, almost every obstacle is insurmountable. But almost is almost. Disability is complicated, and the process of a young person learning to navigate the world of disability is a long and difficult one. A person who's never been outside of a specialized environment for people with disabilities may not be able to effortlessly transition to a teen Jewish overnight camp, for instance. It doesn't mean that they don't have the capability, just that there may be steps, skills, and strategies which need to be developed first. A single-night youth group event in the hometown may be a great first step. This, then, is the final learning. In those rare occasions when it's simply impossible to include a particular interested young person in a program, don't leave it there. Instead, ask yourself, what needs to change between now and the next program so that next time it can be a yes? When we do this event next year, how can we make sure that they can participate? Work on a strategy together. Make a goal. Get there. What may be insurmountable for tomorrow may be achievable with a multi-year plan, which is feasible so long as you always maintain the commitment that your ultimate goal is to connect to every kid, everywhere. I was lucky that as the son of a rabbi, my participation was assumed even though occasionally it couldn't happen immediately. The one thing that you can do today is give the same assumption to every child with a disability in your community, regardless of who their parents are. This is how you foster universal inclusion in your youth events.